Hello, hello. Welcome to my very first screen recording video situation. I write reports. I have this little Substack channel where I publish them and I write just things that I'm interested in and sort of my POV and read on those things. You can see it here on the side of this screen. And today I also have my little not so well done matcha. I wanted to do this first one on my series called Culture Stories. The little background story about it is that I used to work at this big social media company and I had this idea there and I started sort of build this there. Obviously, it was a little bit different because I had a different objective with it. This one is just to kind of share knowledge and my sort of analysis. But it did not end up happening. And so as I left, I decided to just continue working on it and finally like publish it and have it done. So that's the story. And what culture stories is, um, I noticed that obviously a lot of people talk about trends when it comes to like the social media digital realm. Um, which is fine and is interesting. I also do trend reports. But here, really, I wanted to analyze more how, in this so-called social media realm and digital world, there are new sort of cultures or cultural patterns and almost behaviors that emerge. And they almost become like content genres. But I think I call them culture stories because they're more real into people's lives. My point building the reports or putting it into slides was to make it a bit more self-explanatory and easy to understand. Here I put a little bit of explanation on my approach and the kind of layers. So first, it was to identify the available or existing cultures and ideologies of the internet. If you think of, for example, what mukbang is to foods and eating, like that's a whole culture that kind of was emphasized digitally. I know it's something that comes from Asia, but it became a bigger thing in the West and sort of a culture around foods that is proper to the digital world, and then to research how commercial content might have played a role in building or participating in these culture or ideologies. So here, for example, if you take Loewe and how they gave a whole new meaning to luxury by being a generator versus like a follower into the whole internet irony, which I called Memvolution, Memevolution. I don't even know how to pronounce it. And the third layer was to find the unexpected moments in these culture stories. So the points where a simple trend could hint at a potential movement. And here I took as an example Potaxi, which is more of a Spanish speaking side of the internet. But this was a meme moment, like a snippet of like a user's video that turned into a whole like generational concept and had global expansion. So Pataxi kind of signifies like the more feminist groups and they're a little bit more woke and all of that. And then there is like a counter group to that, which are called the FIFAs. Anyways, that's a whole culture story basically. Um, so that was like the first main approach, and then every time before I would go into more of a research phase, I would try to lay down three definitions. So I gave a definition to culture, to story, and to lore um, in this context, obviously, of what I was doing. And then for each like theme, each culture story, I would give it what is the culture, what is the story, and what is the lore of this topic and theme. And then I think the most significant thing that I came up with was the cloud mechanisms. I was thinking, how do all these like pieces of content and people and profiles and ideas, like nano ideas, come together in a cumulative way and create like clout and hype. So I guess the tip of that um is what people refer to as like a viral moment or a trend. So I kind of dissected what's under all of that and how it all connects. And I called that clout mechanisms. This is my list of culture stories. The first one is introvert stale, so quiet influence. I'll take you straight to the report. Naismith was very representative of um this new style that was very like quieter and yeah, more of an introvert's POV and way of doing things. If you think about the influencer world or creator world, it's always been up until I guess this shift that I'm talking about here, very in your face, very you had to be an introvert, an extrovert, quote unquote. As I was explaining before, for each one, I kind of filled in what was the culture, the story, and the lore. So yeah, I think here the most interesting part is really that there's been this shift, or not even this shift, this new way of being a content creator and like sharing narratives and stories in a quieter, more introverted way, which that as a consequence brought also different styles and ways of for people to present themselves on social media. We've seen it also with ways to narrate videos that can be a bit like softer and quieter and maybe less aggressive in a way. So here's the clout mechanism. So I had like few pockets, the appeal of subtle storytelling, then this counterculture of consumption, which we saw with like mainly de-influencing, which started what, like 2 years ago, and then the whole obviously TikTok effect of how people visualized or how they produce content that is introverted content. And then luxury is quite creative, so quite luxury. A brand like Miu Miu is what I would think of. Bottega Veneta as well, then the whole collaboration between Loewe and Studio Ghibli. So that whole vibe. But I'll give you an example of what I mean within like the TikTok effect, what creative looks like from this like introverted POV. I think this one is a really good example. There's so many ways that this introvert's POV and style comes across. And that's exactly the whole point. So it either shows an aesthetic or the narrative or the tone of the creator, or just the visuals they use to kind of tell the story. And I think what's really interesting also is this whole so counterculture of consumption. If you think about like soft life, um, bed rotting, journaling, Nara Smith starting things from scratch. It's just much more like introverted and inwards looking. So that was my first one. I'm obviously not going to take you through the whole thing. A second one was gossip feeds. Here, what I was noticing was the whole like companionship type of content, um, which was intertwined with being gossipy, basically. So I called it gossip feeds equal company. As I was saying before, my culture, story, lore, the definition to kind of frame what I will be talking about. Um, and here is the cloud mechanism. So here we have a few different pockets. On one side, microgram storytelling, URL, gossip, phenomena, IRL in real life, trend stories and viral narratives. And then if you think of formats like street interview or micro-trottoir, like they call it in French, And then real-time company, if you think of live streams, for example, DJ AG is this London DJ. He became quite famous on TikTok for his live streams. So there's all these things happening that are really building up this companionship type of content and those like gossip feeds. So there's things that happen like intentional drama. I'm sure you remember Riza Tisa, 50 episodes or I don't know how many, Who the Fuck Did I Marry? Which was a series of TikTok where she was telling her real life story about her divorce. Things like Reddit story time, people grabbing story times from Reddit and reading them on TikTok or like short form for people to consume. They are usually crazy, but obviously it's not the person that you're seeing in the videos, real life. They're telling someone else's life. There's this whole like Brazilian stock telenovela. I'll show you this one. This one's fascinating for me. URL gossip phenomena IRL, so the whole connection between things that kind of start in the digital realm and happen in real life. So when I did this, it was the whole like lookalike contest. I feel like now I could add on here the whole performative male contests. And yeah, then all these different formats of telling stories and like keeping people company through their phone, but in like very in real life settings, like the tube, the bus, is the street. So yeah, this was number two. And then number three was Surreal Chaos, Brain Rot. I think this is such a big one that is really going to continue evolving and I find so interesting. So I called it Surreal Chaos, Elevated Brain Rot, Chaotic Marketing. I guess that's more of the commercial perspective. Again, the three definitions. When nonsense is influential. I really had fun building this one. So the cloud mechanism here, I feel like this one, so I had these axes, so I built it a little bit differently than the two previous ones that I just showed. So one, you have the aesthetic and then um, the narrative. I tried to place them accordingly to how high they were on those axes. So we have weird core as a category. So AI filters, brands like Avavav, they basically um, they always have like performative fashion shows, but in a very like yeah, chaotic, a little bit crazy way. So this one, everything was falling apart. And then the surge of modern myths, which I call digital folklore. So here, the Leyenda de la Puchina, which is related to Potaxi, which I mentioned earlier on the video. It's a big lore, so you like it will take time to explain it, but it's basically this avocado that is turned into a character initially because that meme that went viral about Potaxi was a woman talking about avocado having potassium in it. Anyways, so that's why they're called those because it's this very, um particular stories with like all these little details and it's just so interesting how they came to be a bigger thing. It's built collectively. Then like other digital folklores with like those like heroes like Luigi Mangione, for example. And then algorithmic storytelling. So here I put Doechi, how she's so like intertwined with the digital world and how it really helps tell her story or build her character almost. Martha Stewart, I remember this, um, you know, she was making this type of video. Um, she's someone that made very traditional cooking, videos. So it's interesting to see her come on social and make content like this. She's also kind of making fun of people and like people that can't cook and stuff. But very brain rot, meme aesthetic and storytelling. Um, what else? And then the whole chaos economy. So this whole brain rot idea also going into real life matters like money, for example. So people making videos like this guy. I mean, this creator, he literally is like a brain rot creator. That's number three. Number four is the revival habit. So basically, here I'm talking about nostalgia. Um, but we looking at nostalgia core and nanostalgia cycles. So how it's become so short, and now within this digital world, there's also nostalgia. So not only referring to like, Y2K 20 years ago, but more so short-lived. Again, here my culture, story, and lore for each one, and then the intro. So past forward is nostalgia core. So one of the points that I'm making, obviously, we all know about nostalgia, but it's this whole thing of like short form platforms and AI are accelerating the speed and depth of nostalgia-driven content, so making past eras instantly accessible and remixable. So it really kind of changes what nostalgia could have meant in the past because of technology and the digital world. Nostalgia is a cultural habit, so where past aesthetics are woven into contemporary storytelling rather than simply revived. Anyways, going into the cloud mechanism framework, um, here I just built it into a loop because really that's what it is. It's like this infinite circle loop of remixing and recreating things, either aesthetics, either specific areas that had a specific symbol or message. Um, but how I did it was that there's basically different types of nostalgia. And so I had all these content that I was noticing, and I had to find a way to put it into the cloud mechanism. So the reason why everybody talks about nostalgia and it's like a trend is because all of this happens or it is happening. We first have classic nostalgia, just the definition of what it feels to be nostalgic. Then we move on through short form to digital nostalgia, which then takes us to nostalgia core boom. So this is really like the Y2K, the 2000, like all these things that became so big in the past years on social, mainly on TikTok and short form. There's so many participatory codes. So if you think about the Real Housewives, like I put it in this box, it's not that old, but it is nostalgic. Like the people watching it or engaging in the conversations and the codes of it on social are not the age of the people in the cast of the Real Housewives, and certainly didn't watch it 10 years ago when it was coming out and starting 10 or 15 almost. Um, so yeah, and here you also have things like archival vintage accounts. This one is quite known, I think, but it's just like, New York in the 90s. And it's literally just videos like that with the music. It just gives you the whole vibe. Things like medieval core, I feel like this was bigger when I was doing this, but we go way back. But then we also have nanostalgia, which is very short lived. And I think this is obviously accelerated by Gen AI. You'll have things like, 2014 Tumblr was a trending hashtag. I feel like now in this moment that I'm making the video, there's a lot of talk around 2016 and people being like, take me back to 2016. It sounds ridiculous, but it is real because everything changes so fast and technology evolves so fast that it feels nostalgic because the Instagram posts, the iPhones that we had, all of that brings a significant like visual um style that is attached to not even a decade, that specific year, 2016. So yeah, that's the fourth one. And then number five, I really like this one, is called Smart Flex. So I was obviously noticing that everybody wanted to flex that they have brains, basically, in terms of their career or that they just have an opinion or they have critical thinking. So intellect and opinion-based clouds. This again is something that is definitely a thing and will continue to grow and is um a digital culture. It's something that I don't think could happen if it wasn't for participatory social media, It's so smart is status symbol. You can kind of think about maybe 20 years ago where was smart really status symbol? I mean, it's always been right, you're a doctor, all of that, but in terms of just like pop culture, status symbol maybe 20 years ago was more about getting the money and showing the money. Um, Now it's a little bit different, I think. So here again, the cloud mechanism specific to this one. So here I did the axis again, so sort of going into like abstract and actual things. Um, when I'm in abstract, there's people that talk more about things that are more like philosophical or like their opinion. They're like more difficult to grasp, and then actual is like, I don't know, if you're a woman in STEM, you show how to make a calculation. I don't know, something like that. This, I remember struggling a little bit with this one. So, uh, this wave that you see here was me trying to kind of divide it in two things happening simultaneously. So it's a bit drafty. Um, but starting, let's say, with the bottom of abstract and going into actual, so we have book talk, um, tapping into specific fandoms. A brand that very smartly did that is Miu Miu. So they are capitalizing on smart, and creating community around smart and knowledge exchange, basically, because we know reading is good. And then you have like chess clubs that are having a moment and having hype, which is very interesting if you actually think about it. Like, it's not easy to play chess. Um, it's a smart hobby to have. And then obviously the top one I have is women in STEM, so that's like a huge content rise um for the past, I don't know, maybe 5 years. I think the fact that it's women in that specific field, they're bringing a very different perspective. They might be a bit more creative than their male counterparts. So this one is like, I think, one of the biggest sort of verticals or trends, if we could call it like that, of this whole culture of smart flex, like I called it. And then the sort of second part, we have the futurists, so the forecasters, the people that are just yappa 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 about what they think is gonna happen. A little bit, I guess, I would fall under this type of content that I'm making just right now will fall under this. Or maybe more, yeah, the strategist and creative directors era. This is such a big thing, and I guess maybe people think this is not about showing that you're smart, but showing that you're creative. I think that's very intertwined. And the bottom point is to be like, I have a personality, I have a brain, and this is how I show up on social media and therefore also in real life, I guess, because it is connected. And then the pod bras and the pod girls, all the CEOs, the founders. I think like that's like another, side of this. I mean, this is huge, people that do this type of podcasts have like millions of views. We know it's big. And then kind of adjacent to that, I put psychology and motivation. So a podcast like Fashion Neuroses by Bella Frode, like I think has like such a great balance of all of this that I'm talking about. I put it on the actual side because it's a little bit scientific, just because of that psychoanalysis or whatever concept. But yeah, I don't know. Um, yeah, here I put like a few characters to watch that are Smart Flex characters. So you can see they're very different. Like I'm not just saying people that are showing expertise on social, like it's a bit deeper and layered than that. Um, and then I also put like brand examples that tap into this like aesthetic of like knowledge and brains or whatever, mainly all scientific. So that was number five. Number six, oh, I really like this one as well. Hope Core and Luluism. This has been going on for a few years, and I feel like this one is more of a something that people will know as a trend, or the Lulu trend, the Hope Core trend. So I really looked at it again as like this is like a culture that has developed around this. So subtitle is Cleric content in 2025. I thought that was funny. As usual, my three definitions. The Lulu dream, but it's trill. This I would wanted to say true and real together. Trill. Um, so yeah, the internet has become a net of belief systems, loosely connected rituals, aesthetics, and narratives, all anchored in resisting the status quo and seeking escapism. Um, I think this one is broad in a way, but here's the cloud mechanisms. One acts here with two sort of opposites, but they're not opposites. They also work together, but it was a way for me to, map it. Um, but yeah, some of them will say are almost purely aesthetic, and some of them are almost purely narrative, which it is the case of some of the examples that I put here and that I saw when I was researching. So, for instance, if we start from narrative, you will have things like philosophical delusion, this video. This is like very, basic social media content. This and thinking Microsoft Teams is a football club. So this is what I mean, that it's just narrative, it's just delivering you the message, but it doesn't really have a particular aesthetic, or it doesn't have an aesthetic point of view. Anyways, so that's like escapist empowerment. One that I think is very interesting is like viral emotional validation, the validation of life and approaches that sort of aura approval. Um, so I noticed that a lot of people that do that are like the older generation that create this type of content. So I'll give you this example. You understand what I'm talking about? There are a lot of videos like this. Micro rituals, daily blessings. I think a big trend here is first of the month, which is the song by Playboy Carti, I believe, and it's just become like a short form ritual that people will post a video with the first of the month song every first of the month. What else? Then we have mood-based content. So this is what I mean, like more purely aesthetic, but that are escapist and give you that like horrorcore vibe. Um, and maybe it's more therapy than like spirituality, if we can divide. And then finally, we have spiritual aesthetic. So here, think about celestial visuals, crystal candles, healing sounds, all that sort of thing. And I put this Loewe example here just you get it or you don't sort of thing. So that was six. Now moving on to seven. Um, so this is around cultural exchange. I think this is one that was generated from a lot of cultures going on social and getting to know each other. And here I mean like national cultures, right? Like people from this country or this other country. They created this global exchange, which I think is super, super interesting and sort of unprecedented, really. Again, my three definitions. So, decentralized cultural engine. I think here the bigger point is to say that because of digital and social media, these cultures all came together, discovered about each other, exchanged in a way that never really happened before in a very like entertainment based only. It's not about debating, it's about sharing, oh, you do that, we do, and we just exchange. And kind of versus or against almost a central culture that kind of, um feeds into other cultures. So notably, you would just say like US film industry, producing movies for the rest of the world or the Western world at least. So yeah, a lot of fun, interesting things happen in this one, I think. Um, Here in the cloud mechanism, here I just did it as like nods, and little areas of things that happen. So Brasilism, I think Brazil really had a lot of momentums in this culture of global exchange. So their music, first of all. But then earlier I was showing this example of like the dog telenovelas and so yeah, Baile Funk, the music. I think connected to that is also like vintage Latin music that has led so many social media trends. And I feel like really helped to have this like comeback. You could even tie into like Bad Bunny doing his latest album and being so successful to that already had like planted the seeds in a way, in a very subtle, unconscious way for people. Then you have British core with Jet to Holiday as an example, French core, uh, Wesh. They had La Fête de la Musique, which is a very famous in France music event in the summer. And now people from other European countries started going again because of social media. We had Dubai chocolate, um, the weight trend that was done in like so many languages, Nordicness, so this candy style, and then I feel like there's this whole like Asian Western import, so many Asian things that become so trendy in Europe or in the Western world in America and become very successful. So yeah, I feel like this one is an obvious one, but super interesting to research and definitely something that is gonna continue growing. That is for sure. And we got to the last one, which is softcore ecosystem, cuteness and kindness. Um, this is such an obvious one for me, but maybe because I am served this culture all the time, that it's just the internet being full of like cuteness in terms of visuals. So we obviously know animals are the most successful hook, but there's also kindness, like people really, I don't know, promoting kindness and showing that it is a good way um to be kind. So on screen, hyper kindness, um yeah. it's really content that brings that feel good relief and like soothes us in this very agitated life and world that we live in. Um, so this one is again a little bit chaotic, but I have these two main axes. So the soothing satisfaction, how soothing it is, and the cuteness overload, which is also another feeling. So on the left side, I was building around like companion toyification. So the whole like kidult trend, Labubu, Sunny Angels, like we've been through that for the past year. Kind of related, you have like journaling and having that little thing that is bringing you company. So you're journaling, you have your diary. It's either visual, very visual diary, or more like written one, landscapes and cozy scenes. So this is just things that look good to the eyes and that are soothing, that are kind to the eye. Then on the other side of the framework, we have things like farm animals. So here divided emotional hooks and tenderness hooks. So tenderness, I put like grandparents, these types of videos. And also if you go into the comments, like it really adds to this. And then emotional hooks, things like babies, kittens, puppies, that is just like the first second of seeing them, you just kind of it hooks you and you stay. Um, and here I made this like they kind of explain why these videos become so viral because they do like it's so common to see like yeah, a video of a baby cow and it has like 2 million likes. That's a lot. So first is the emotional hook. Then obviously it's such a like highly shareable content because you usually want to share it with your mom, with your sister, with your friend. You're like, ah, look how cute, which helps a lot to bring virality, because it's superior, it counts more than a like. It creates this like looping consumption also where you're like you actually watched it like 10 times. Um, and it's almost used as like social utility, like you're sending this little like soft core gift, this feel good gift to someone. Here I put gifting good vibes. So yeah, it's also an interesting one. I didn't mention before, but the last slide of each is sort of like what's the recommendation for a brand. Um, so yeah, that's all of them. It's quite a lot. I didn't want to go too much into detail because you can go and read it in your own time. It was kind of fun to go through all of them again. Usually, you work on stuff and then you kind of leave it there and you don't really rethink about it so much. So this was nice. Also, the video is quite long, so you can fast forward and go into whichever you're interested to hear about. But thank you so much for watching. You can go follow me on Substack, or you can also check my website where I publish all the reports in presentation modes, like the keynotes. Um, and yeah, I'll see you for my next screen recording video.